Сейчас у нас будет Зузана Коблишкова, документалист Национальной галереи Словакии. И это такой хитрый доклад, мы пока еще не все понимаем.
Yes, it is actually about almost present, as you said. I'm going to present work in progress of the project at the Slovak National Gallery. And we aim to launch this project for the 30th anniversary of the Velvet Revolution, which was on 17th of November 1989. The project presents a number of challenges for the gallery and the team preparing the project, and I will not present any specific solutions or outcomes, but I will describe a process of preparing a digital project that needs to go beyond the collections of the gallery, as well as beyond the physical premises of the gallery. I will also talk about the reasons why we think such an approach is necessary. The first and most obvious challenge for a gallery preparing a project dealing with a specific historical moment is the fact that the visual art and visual culture is not always self-explanatory, and it often takes time for the art to take its effect and to manifest through art change and artistic of a style. However, the Slovak National Gallery prepared a comparable project dealing with another historic period of the First Slovak Republic, 1939 to 45, which was called Dream and Reality, Art and Propaganda, 1939-45. That was in 2016. It was an exhibition and a website, which is still active today, and you can check it out yourself. It's in English and also in Slovak. The website provided an overview of the visual art and culture with broad historical context. The importance of the exhibition and a digital project resulting in a website with multimedia content was also heightened by the fact that in 2016, parliamentary elections in Slovakia allowed a neo-Nazi party to get elected. The urge to remind the voters about the terrifying consequences of the ideology was strengthened by the polling that showed that some of the most radical fans of the party were between 18 to 21 years old. The result of the election sent shockwaves through the society, and therefore the gallery took its role with a great deal of responsibility towards historical accuracy and contextuality. The storytelling approach of this exhibition was chronological, but also developed through topics laid out as chapters, and the visitors of the exhibition and the website were offered a navigation system through the presented visual and contextual material. In 2018, the murder of the journalist and his partner Jan Kuciak and Martina Kušnírova became the tipping point for the society and set off a series of protests which were often compared with those of November 1989. The All for Jan was a hashtag or the name of the movement that was created to support the families of the murdered pair. The comparisons of the protests in 1989 and 2018 were in size but also in intensity, but the parallels can also be found in some of the slogans appearing among the protests and the themes of the protests. The 30th anniversary of the Velvet Revolution was no longer just another anniversary of a historical event. It gained new context. However, we need to be extremely careful not to draw the links between the events too quickly. I will not go into much detail of the reasons and context of the protests at the moment, as I am more interested in the form of the expressions of the people who attended them. The team of the lab SNG, Slovak National Gallery, together with the curator of the collections of modern and contemporary art, began with a debate on the ideas of the Velvet Revolution and how, or if they were related to the protest of 2018. And perhaps I should note that the team consists of the curator, who was about 15 years old in 1989, the head of the digital collections and services, who was also in his teens and who was trained as a library scientist, then 2 art historians who were born a couple of years prior to the Velvet Revolution, including me, and a Dutch web developer in his 30s. We all were on the streets in 2018, but our experience of that event is too fresh, and although there have been some changes of the political climate that we could interpret as the consequences of those protests, one of the most significant ones definitely being the fact that we have now the first female president in the history of the country, Zuzana who won the elections mainly thanks to her honesty and open communication, and that is a significant contrast to the communication of the leading government parties in Slovakia. Many people also see parallels between her and Václav Havel, who also entered politics and became the president of Czechoslovakia after 1989 revolution, thanks to his genuine, honest communication with people. Once again, that parallel is only symbolic, as their positions are different as well as their background and role in the society. The truth is that we cannot and should not interpret the events of the last year within the context of the Velvet Revolution, but we should point out that we are living through an incredibly turbulent and crucial historical moment, and as historians, art historians, and museum and gallery professionals, we should try to collect and save as much visual and textual material as possible in order to provide next generations with material to work with in the future. With this on our mind, we decided not to repeat the approaches that prevailed in the 20th anniversary of the Velvet Revolution in 2009. And many of these projects were were based on oral histories of the leading personalities of the revolution, and were trying to impose a particular narrative about the events. Although a number of excellent documentaries, publications, and exhibitions came out of such approach, we felt it was time to look at the event from a different perspective and to include the public more into interpreting the material we have collected, not only in our gallery, but also in other institutions. The project we are working on will be mostly digital, and there will be no physical exhibition at the Slovak National Gallery. One of the reasons of such decision was that our collections hold very few artworks that can be directly related to the topics. This is actually from the collection of the Institute of the Memory of the Nation. And by this, I don't mean that there was no visual art involved in the revolution. On the contrary, there was a lot of visual art involved. However, most of the visual expressions of the protesters were ephemeral, such as the posters that were glued to the walls of Bratislava or Prague and many other cities around Czechoslovakia. There were also many visually appealing posters or artworks done by people who were not artists but felt like expressing themselves at the moment in such way. And of course, there was also action art, a specific type of site-specific performances that are hard to reconstruct, such as the example from the archive of the Slovak National Gallery. This was made by Aleš Votava, who is a scenographer, or was a scenographer. And this is his November 1989 happening in Prague, dedicated to the victims and the humiliated ones. As far as the physical exhibition commemorating the revolution, the Slovak National Museum is preparing one exhibition of such type, and they are conducting an extensive research trying to collect as much material as possible. However, as my colleague Zuzana Koblишková had already mentioned, many of those objects encapsulate strong emotions, and people are reluctant to give them up, even for an exhibition. Such example is a cap called Budajka, worn by one of the leaders of the protest in 1989, Jan Budaj. The gallery could exhibit posters and some photographs, but it would not be enough to hold the whole exhibition. So instead, we decided to choose one artwork that could provide an umbrella for our project, and that would provide loose navigation for people to find their way through the material we have researched. And that umbrella became Časopis, a diary-like account of the year 1989, written by Julius Koller, one of the most well-known conceptual artists in Slovakia. The title has two meanings. Časopis could stand for a magazine, but written with the hyphen, it stands for time and description. Koller was obsessed with writing, rewriting, and documenting. His art production was twofold. He painted pictures he called bread earning in the officially approved socialist realist style, and then he produced a staggering amount of what we call conceptual art. Among those, thousands of pages of texts. Some of them are just copied from foreign magazines, and some are his reflections and ideas. But in general, his comments and accounts of the period were full of irony, wit, and humor. We have selected only 5 months from his 1989 Časopis, and that in itself is around 1,000 pages of handwritten text. Instead of a common museological approach, when the curator chooses the pages to be displayed, we have decided to work with all of the pages using a crowdsourcing tool called From the Page, which allows us to have all the handwritten pages transcribed by volunteers. The text can be then processed and enriched by visual and contextual material, and we will be able to provide the visitors to the web page dedicated to this project with a significant amount of information and numerous ways of reading it. Perhaps in a similar way as the project of Phantom Info Context, which works with textual analysis. The navigation will not provide only a single reading of the material, but it will allow people to think about the connections with their own realities, with their past and present. Koller commented on mundane things and always began with a weather forecast that also provides a way into the text and an opportunity to provide a different perspective, as if concentrating on the events from the ground up and not the other way around as the previous projects have mostly done. As far as the contextual material we can provide for the visitors of the webpage, we have a number of options. We have done research in the archives of the Slovak Radio and Television Broadcasting and the Slovak Film Institute, and we have pre-selected some of the most interesting audiovisual materials, such as debates, interviews, broadcastings from the streets, documentaries, and so on. We might organize an event at which we would encourage people to create their own versions of 1989 posters and discuss with them their own interpretation of the events from today's perspective and how they think their posters have been influenced by the reality of the last year's protests. According to Viktor Sebastian, a Hungarian journalist working for major Anglo-American newspapers and journalist and author of the book Revolution 1989, The Fall of the Soviet Empire, in Czechoslovakia the revolution was done with plenty of music, wit and humor, laughter and little absurdity. As you can see from the jokes that were recorded. The protests of 2018 and 2019 were also accompanied by humor, or rather irony, and sometimes cruel black humor. Although it may seem appealing to put the events next to each other and talk about the ideas of two generations fighting for their ideas, there are many problems with such straightforward interpretations. We should not do that from the position of authorities as museums or galleries, but we may invite public to draw links they feel are appropriate for them. One of the organizers of the protest in 1989 admitted in the documentary about the revolution that the posters are the best democratic tool for the society, as they reach out to people and their gallery is out in the street. He admitted that the posters they were making in '89 were inspired by posters of previous revolutions, including the Great October Revolution in Russia. He said it was enough to change some words, or sometimes the same words could be used as the context was different and their meaning automatically changed. I would like to conclude my presentation with a warning. As time changes, the form of the visual material connected to significant historical moments changes, and it is our responsibility as museum professionals to find ways of preserving it. Posters are done for a particular moment, often on the spot, with a great number or with a great amount of emotions, but rarely survive or are immediately put aside for archivation. While in 1989 the posters were glued to the walls and people came with their own notebooks to copy the slogans from the posters, which you could see on the little picture over there, they were actually coming to the exhibition and they were rewriting the slogans. One of the most popular social media source of black humor and political satire in Slovakia, called Zomri.sk, produces a great number of digital posters per day. The ideas shared through the site come from the public and therefore should also be considered as one of the sources we might be looking into 10, 20 or 50 years from now when looking back at the events of 2018 and 2019. We have entered the digital age, and our project, exhibitions, and in general work with the collection has to exceed the physical premises of the museum and galleries, and we need to think outside the box. Thank you for your attention.
Спасибо.